Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today, this was supposed to be the second Black Lives Matter video, but I had like super long notes, and so like I kept pushing it back, but we're here now. In this video, basically I'm gonna just be educating everybody on some stuff because I feel like, again, it's really important to be educated on everything that's going on. And it's also like kind of my opinion kind of thing. Like, a lot of these are my opinions, but at the same time I'm also going to be educating people at the same time. And I do want to address something. On my very first video where I was talking about my experiences, I don't know how many people actually like thought that I was trying to play victim, but I did get some comments saying that like, oh, I was trying to play victim. I just want everyone to know my intention was not to play victim on that video. I understand that I don't have the worst life that a Black person could have. I understand that. Like, I completely get it. And I also understand that not everything is about race. I understand that. That video was not for anybody to feel bad about for me. That was not my intention. I don't want anybody's pity. I don't want anybody's like sympathy. That's not what that video was for. Just so everyone knows. And I just also want to say that you cannot sit here and tell people that they're playing victim and their like life isn't that bad and this wasn't as bad for them and that wasn't as bad for them. Like, you don't get to tell people that. Like, I'm sorry about it, but like, you don't get to try and invalidate other people's feelings just because you've never been through it and you don't know how it feels. Okay, now my rant is over and I'm done. Now let's get into the actual education part. We're going to be talking about the N-word, we're going to be talking about police brutality, we're going to be talking about ACAB, we're going to be talking about racism and prejudice and microaggressions and all that kind of stuff. But basically it's going to be a mix of my opinions and views along with me trying to educate you guys using my voice. So the first topic that I'm going to be talking about is the N-word. Personally, I don't think anybody should really say it. Like, I don't like the word, but it's probably also because it's been negatively used towards me, so that might just be a me thing. But if anyone's going to use the word, it definitely is Black people. Like, Black people are the only people who should be able to use the word. It's just not okay for any other race to say it. I know that people are like, oh, well, like Hispanics can get away with saying it and Asians can get away with saying it. I do personally think that other races other than white tend to get away with it more, but I definitely don't think it's right. I don't think they should. I think they should be called out just as much as white people should be. In case you guys did not know, the very original meaning like before white people took it and made it negative, it was for Black people to call each other like king and queen. It's kind of like today's meaning for us at least, but instead it was like king and queen, like showing that you guys are powerful, like that the Black race is like powerful kind of thing. When white people took the word and changed it a little bit, they changed it into a negative connotation to show that Black people were less than a human, and to degrade Black people. It was also used to put like negative connotations such as lazy and dirty, just negative stereotypes upon Black people. That's also what they would use to identify slaves. So if there was like a John that was a slave and there was a John that was a slave owner, they would call the slave N-word John. That is basically some of the history behind it. That's not all of the history behind it, but you need to understand the history to know why it's not okay to say, especially as a white person, as an Asian person, as a Hispanic person. And like, same thing with like for Black people, it's not okay to say any of the derogatory terms for any of the other races either. But I also want to mention that cracker is not a derogatory term. It's not a derogatory term. It was not used to oppress white people. It was literally a word made from white people, and it was to say they called white people crackers because it was the sound that the whip made on the Black people's back. It was like a crack sound. So just want to put that out there. It's not a derogatory term. It was not used to oppress. White people actually made the word themselves. So since you now know like a little bit of the history behind it, I also want to say like, okay, yeah, like today it like means homie, it means friend, it means buddy. Like, yeah, it means that to Black people, but I don't think people realize that just because it has an A at the end and just because it can mean buddy or homie doesn't mean that you can't turn it into a negative thing. Because in my personal experience, people know that they're not supposed to say it with a hard R. So they use it with the A because it's more socially acceptable, and they'll start turning it into a bad meaning. So they'll be like, oh, you stupid N-word, but with the A at the end. Or you're just, oh, you stupid homie. Like, no, like that's not what you mean. You really mean the other meaning. You really are trying to degrade me and oppress me and this and that. So I don't want to hear it come out of anybody's mouth except for Black people, because Black people are trying to take it back and try to make it into another powerful word. I don't know why it's such a fight for white people to like be trying to fight with like black people and why they should say it and why they shouldn't say it. And if you guys want to fight so bad to say it, because black people tend to be like, oh, it's opening up like a wound when white people say it, all this and that. So like, if you white people want to say it so badly, y'all need to let the black people heal. Y'all need to let them do their own thing. You need to let us do our own things, our own words, this and that. You guys got your own stuff. Let the black people heal, and then let the black people decide when they want you guys to join in, because it's really none of your concern and none of your job to say, oh, I should be able to say I'm not using it in a negative way, because it's not your position, it's not your place. So, and it really shouldn't be a fight. Like, it's a simple word that you could easily replace. But I do feel like if you expect your white friend not to say it, you shouldn't say it around them, you know? Also, I just want to say to all you black people who are out there like, oh yeah, this is a white person that I think would be able to say the N-word, and oh, here's my N-word pass. Like, when was there a pass? There's no such thing as an N-word pass. Nobody gets an N-word card. That's dumb. And basically, the people who are saying that people get the N-word card and people get the N-word pass are literally encouraging white people to be racist, pretty much, and are encouraging white people and other races to be able to say that stuff when it's really not okay to say. The next little topic thing that I kind of want to talk about is like colorism, because not a lot of people really know what colorism is. And let me get started. So colorism, I don't know if this is the same for like other races, like for Hispanics or Islanders or anything like that, but for black people, it's essentially like the different shades of black, and then like how each shade is like essentially treated differently. So personally, I feel like colorism is a lot more apparent like when it comes to like social things and like within your friends and within your schools and stuff like that, versus like in the government. But at the same time, it's really apparent everywhere. I understand where I stand as like a light-skinned woman, and I have almost like a certain advantage to being light-skinned, but I don't have white privilege. And the next topic after this colorism, white versus black thing, is white privilege, so I will get into that after this. But I don't have white privilege. I am black, but I do recognize that I have almost a certain kind of advantage compared to like a darker skinned person. Because like, for example, when you are like talking to guys or whatever, it tends to be more that people like light skins more than they like dark skins. I don't agree. Dark skins are literally beautiful. People with darker skin complexions are gorgeous, amazing. But same thing with people with lighter skin complexions. I think all brown is beautiful. I think all black is beautiful. But that is how kind of society works. Like, everybody looks up to light skins. Everybody praises light skins, and everybody's like, oh my god, light skins are so beautiful. Like, I want light skin babies. If I'm driving and then a darker skin complexion person is driving, and we're driving next to each other, the same speed, the same everything, and a cop is behind us, I have more of a chance to get away with doing whatever I'm doing than the darker skin complexion person does. But if it was just me, I still am going to be treated the same as a black person, like a darker skin complexion black person, because I'm still considered black and I still look black. So like, in the system, even though I am light skinned, I'm still going to be treated as black. Like, I am a black person, I'm a person of color, because I still go through the same struggles as like darker skin complexion people. I still go through all the racism, the prejudice, the microaggressions, everything like that. And like, you can think of it this way: if I were to get pulled over and a cop were to like have to identify me or whatever, they wouldn't identify me as white. Like, sure, I have white in me, but they would identify me as an African American woman. So that shows like how in the system I am still considered black, but because of colorism, I have more of like an advantage, I guess, in certain scenarios than darker skinned people do. And just because I have white in me, because I hate when people are like, oh, you have white in you, like, you can't do this, you can do that, like, you're white, like, I don't know why white people do this and you're crapping on white people for this. Like, yeah, just because I have white in me doesn't mean I identify with the white community. Because again, in the system, people identify me as African American. I'm not white. Like, when you look at me, you don't think white. I may have white in me, half my family may be white, but I don't identify with the white community. So just because you have white in you does not mean that you identify with the white community. Also, I want to bring attention to, just because you grow up in a white community doesn't make you any less black. You may grow up with different cultures around you, and you may grow up with like the white stigma and, oh, you're whitewashed, just because, like, for me, I grew up in a white community. Just because I talk more proper than like maybe somebody does in a more predominantly black community doesn't mean that I'm less black, like anything like that. Just because I was put in that situation doesn't make me lose color in my skin. And also, I do want to say that white passing definitely is a thing, like white passing black people thing, and that kind of gives you a sense of white privilege, I would say. If people don't know that you're black, they're not going to treat you like you're black. Like, they're going to identify you as white, even if you do have black in you. So it does kind of give you white privilege if you're white passing. Just because I have like certain advantages in the community or in the system or whatever for being light-skinned considered like, or compared to a dark-skinned person, does not mean that I benefit from white privilege, because I don't. So that leading into it gets me on a topic about white privilege. So I want to say that just because you have white privilege does not mean that you're racist. Don't take this the wrong way, but all white people have white privilege. It doesn't mean that your life isn't hard, but it does mean that your life is not hard based off of the color of your skin. If you don't acknowledge and realize that you have white privilege and that you have advantages and everything based because you are white and you are in America, you are literally part of this problem. Like, you are part of the whole entire issue, because you need to recognize that you have white privilege as a person of white skin. Something that people don't realize when they're like, oh, I don't have white privilege, like just because I'm white doesn't mean I'm privileged. Like, okay, just because you're white, and you need to realize that white privilege doesn't mean that you have $1 million just because you're white. It doesn't mean that you can afford all this expensive clothing just because you're white. It's like literally the little things. Like, white people being able to argue with a black person about being able to say the N-word is privilege in itself, because you are having the ability to have that conversation with a black person rather than experiencing it. You being able to have the conversation with a black person about how white people should be able to wear braids and should be able to do dreads and cornrows and all this kind of stuff is privilege, because you as a white person have never been told that you would look prettier with white skin and straight hair. Like, you would look prettier and your hair looks ghetto and like all this kind of stuff. That is privilege in itself, because you have never had to experience the thing that black people have. You can still have those conversations. You can have questions. You can be allowed to be curious and be allowed to answer. But if you're sitting there arguing, you need to realize that that is privilege in itself. It also means that you benefit from the oppression that people of color face, whether you like know it or not, whether you're meaning to or not. Like, the fact that black people, it's harder for black people to get into colleges and to get jobs and stuff like that is benefiting white people, because white people are getting more jobs. They are getting more money. They are getting higher pays. They're getting better jobs, better education. That is privilege. That is your white privilege showing through. And you obviously don't mean to like get the job before a black person does. You do need to recognize that like white privilege isn't something that you do on purpose. It's like something that you just have naturally, because we're in America. It's the time that we're in. It's a system that has been built against black people for however many years. But you do need to recognize that you have the white privilege that you have. And it appears in like a number of different ways. For example, systemic racism, kind of like what I was just talking about with like the whole jobs and college thing, being able to like get bank loans and get bank accounts and all this kind of stuff more than a black person can, is a form of white privilege, which also shows up in systemic racism, but it also shows up in like other forms of racism. And I just want to say this at the end of like my little white privilege section. If you are white and you have white privilege, obviously, and you're not using it to educate and you're not using it to benefit black people, you better start now. Now I want to get into the topics of like the protests and the riots and like the looting and everything that's going on with that. This time that I'm posting it, I haven't heard as much about riots and looting as I was in like the very beginning of all of this stuff happening. But I just want to say that I wish we didn't have to riot. I wish we didn't have to loot to be able to get white people's attention. But I also think it's justified and it's deserved, because did you really expect a bunch of black people to be killed for no reason, for us to be like okay with it and just kind of be like like chilling, like be happy about it? Like, no, like it's very justified. It's built off of years of anger, and it's built off of years of sadness and all of this stuff building up. Like, I don't know what people expected us to do, like to just sit there. Also, peaceful protests have been tried. Peaceful protests did not work. They didn't listen. For example, Colin Kaepernick's kneeling protest, that was considered a protest, and he literally got kicked out of the NFL for it. Peaceful protests don't work, and y'all don't listen to words, and y'all don't listen to literally kneeling. What else do you want us to do? Do you really want us to just sit back and deal with it? Like, no, like that's not gonna happen. I want to use like this little analogy that I came up with. If you are sitting there and somebody punches you in the face and they continue to punch you in the face over and over again, you're on the ground, you're like on your last limb. Are you just gonna sit there and tell them, oh no, like stop, that hurts, like stop, like don't do it? Like, no, you're gonna get up and punch back. You're gonna get up and fight back, because that's the only way that they're gonna listen. That's the only way that they're gonna acknowledge you. Like, you're sitting here and punching black people, and you're bringing this down over years and years and years of this oppression and years of this behavior. Did you really expect us just to kind of sit there and ask you guys to stop nicely? Like, I don't know what you thought this was, but it wasn't that. But I definitely think that the violence and the looting and the riots helped to spark like the initial conversation, because if it was just like peaceful protests, it would have been said and then done in a week. Like, things would not have happened, things would not have changed. So I definitely think that violence kind of helped spark the initial like situation, but now I think it's time for more peaceful protests, and I think that the peaceful is like helping, and it's like standing up. And yeah, but even when we do try to be peaceful, like the police still get involved and they end up making it violent. Like, they'll shoot tear gas at people for no reason, they shoot rubber bullets at people for no reason, for literally standing there. They maced a little girl over here in Seattle. What did the little girl have to do? Like, did that little girl really threaten you in any way, like for you to like, hey, sir? I don't agree with looting small businesses. If you're gonna loot businesses that actually can like afford to like restock and to get fixed and stuff like that Target, okay, loot it. I don't think that looting should be like the case ever, really. But if you're gonna loot, if you're gonna like cause ruckus like that, do it to big chains, do it to big businesses that can actually afford to lose that stuff, not small businesses. Like, even if they're white or black, don't do it to small businesses, especially the black businesses, because I heard that there were a lot of small black owned businesses that were like getting looted. Why are you doing that? You're not helping the Black Lives Matter movement at all if you just do that. Like, you're literally defeating the purpose. But I also want to bring to like attention that a lot of the looting is actually white people. You can literally look it up, look up pictures and stuff like that. A lot of the looting and a lot of the violence caused is literally purely from white people, purely because they're trying to take advantage of the situation. Like, if you're not going to go to a riot or a protest or whatever to actually protest for the thing that you're trying to protest for, why are you going? Like, no, you're not angry, you're really just taking advantage of the situation, and you're just being like an asshole for no reason. Also irritates me that like people keep saying like, oh, I want to go to this protest because it's like, it's gonna be a good experience for me. Like, it's like, I want to go take pictures, like I want to like dress up for protests, and oh my god, this and that, like this will be such a good picture. This is not an experience that you should want to have. This is not something that we should be like joyful about. Like, this should not be like, oh my god, picture opportunity. Like, no, this is about Black lives here. Like, this is about people surviving in their day-to-day lives. Like, you should not be going to go take a freaking picture. Like, that's not what this is. Next I want to talk about is like essentially being kind of like double-sided and like talk about like kind of speaking up for the cause and everything like that. So I just want to address like to the people who are speaking up, who aren't speaking up, or kind of like, and also kind of being like two-faced about it. For all the people that I went to school with, if you're not going to respect Black people offline and off social media and in school and in your day-to-day lives, I don't want to see you posting hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag Blackout Tuesday. Like, I don't want to see you posting that stuff I don't want to see that on my time, because you're a hypocrite, you're double-sided, you're two-faced. That shit needs to stop. Like, if you're gonna sit here and be like, oh, Black Lives Matter, then like, okay, stand up for Black people at school. You just want to do it on social media because it's convenient for you and because it's easy to post a black screen saying hashtag Blackout Tuesday when you don't even know the real reason why we're doing the Blackout Tuesday. Well, for the Blackout Tuesday, I saw so many people post hashtag Blackout Tuesday, and it was purely because it was convenient for them. Like, they were not speaking up about it at all before. I have not seen one post. I have not seen one educational anything on anybody's time except for the Blackout Tuesday, and that wasn't even educational. It was simply a black screen with a hashtag on it. Don't do it just because it's a trend, because Black Lives Matter is not a trend. This is a movement. This is a whole entire like worldwide revolution here. Like, this is not just a trend on social media that you can just like post whatever you want. Not speaking up for Black Lives Matter and not speaking up for Black people is literally just as bad as like you being racist and you insulting Black people or whatever. It's literally the same exact thing. Because that's like, if someone says the N-word to a Black person and you're standing right there like with them, and the Black person's kind of looking at you like, oh, are you gonna defend me? That's essentially you saying that it's okay and you don't say anything. That's essentially you saying that it's okay to the white person for them to be able to say that to the Black person. That's why people say that like, oh, if you're not saying anything, you're on the side of the oppressor, because if you're not defending anybody, you're on the side that's just as bad, because you're basically encouraging it, you're basically allowing it to happen. And then also lastly, I just want to say how like people are deeming as like, when people say all lives matter and blue lives matter and how that's disrespectful to the Black Lives Matter. Just so you know, when people say Black Lives Matter, they're not saying white lives and Hispanic lives and Islander lives and Asian lives don't matter. That's not what it's saying. And it's not like, it's not saying that Black Lives Matter is up here and all the other lives are down here. No, it's not. But you cannot sit here and say all lives matter when Black lives don't matter, because I'm pretty sure Black is considered all, and if you don't want to consider it as all, say all lives but Black Lives Matter. Like, if that's really what we're like doing right here, make sure you speak up and say that, because you can't sit here and say all lives matter but then want to sit here and say like, oh, that Black person deserved to die. Nobody is putting Black lives above anybody. We're just like, literally, like, all lives is up here and Black lives are up here. We're just trying to get on y'all's level. We're just trying to be up there with y'all. We're not trying to put us above you. We're trying to be up there on the same level as you guys, because right now we're down here and we want to be up here just the same as you guys are. The next thing that I want to talk about is essentially Black culture, stealing culture, cultural appropriation. Like, I'm really only going to talk about like the Black culture, because I understand that people can appropriate other cultures, but I'm part of the Black community. I'm speaking about the Black community. People don't realize that like when we say that like stealing Black culture is like not okay and all that kind of stuff, and the reason why we get mad is essentially because it's like a double standard. People want to say like, oh, I should be able to wear braids, I should do this, I should do that, but you don't realize the actual meaning why Black people get braids and why people have to have braids in their hair. Black people can't get jobs without braids. Like, certain Black women cannot get jobs without braids because their curly hair, their natural hair, is deemed unprofessional, it's deemed nappy, it's deemed gross, all this kind of stuff. That's why people have to get braids. Same thing with weaves, because a bunch of girls want to say, oh, so you guys can wear straight weaves and you guys can straighten your hair and all this kind of stuff, but we can't wear braids. First of all, straight hair isn't a culture. Second of all, you can be a Black person born with straight hair. I just want to say that. You can be a Black person born with straight hair. So therefore, straight hair is not a culture. Just like curly hair is not a culture, because you can be born white with curly hair. That is not a culture. But braids are. And another thing, braids were meant to like identify tribes and stuff like that. Like in Africa, I'm sure they still are. And like people, like slaves used to have to put braids in because the white people were jealous of the Black people's flamboyant hair. So they had to tie it down, they had to cover it up, all this kind of stuff, because the white people were jealous. And I guess white people have always been jealous, because look at them now. That is why you cannot wear braids. Also, it's just not meant for white people's hair. Like, sure, you can braid your hair, you can do 2 little French braids, like you can do that, but the way that Black people's hair is manipulated to get box braids and to get cornrows is not something that you should ever do on a white person. And this isn't even to like be rude, but you will like go bald. Like, most people go bald after braiding. Like, it would be great if we could all like appreciate like everybody's culture, but there is a difference between cultural appreciation and a cultural appropriation, because there's just like a big difference between it. You can appreciate a culture all you want without actually appropriating it, because cultural appropriation is essentially you taking a culture and not recognizing the meaning behind it and like the actual significance of it. Like getting spray tans, that is cultural appropriation, because you are trying to be darker. And it's also ways that like you want to take other people's culture only when it's convenient for you, when you don't have the same repercussions as that culture does. For example, spray tans. You as a white person can go get darker from a spray tan, but you will never have the oppression that Black people face for having darker skin, but you can go get darker skin all you want. That is the difference between cultural appropriation and appreciation. And I just want to say, if you're gonna try and appropriate a style, like if you're gonna try and like take cornrows, for example, don't try to turn it into your own. Like the Jenners, when they like wore the cornrows and tried to call them boxer braids, they're not boxer braids, they're cornrows. And if you're going to take and copy another culture, at least acknowledge that it's not yours. Again, cultural appropriation is not okay, but if you are going to like try and take another culture, first of all, educate yourself on it. What does it mean? What was it based off of? What did it originate from? Like all that kind of stuff. Acknowledge that it's not yours. Say that, yeah, I understand this is from the Asian culture, this is from the African American culture, like all this kind of stuff. And don't try to turn it into your own. Don't try to rename things because, oh, it's part of your culture now. Like, no, it's not. It's never has been, never will be. The next thing that I want to talk about is ACAB. So I want to pull attention to, because at first I got this wrong, actually. I thought ACAB meant all cops are bad, but it's actually all cops are bastards. And it's not bad, it's bastards. And I just want to bring attention to bastard comes from the word bastardize, I believe, and bastardize actually means to be corrupt. That is why people say all cops are bastards, and we're gonna get into that in a minute. But obviously not all cops are bad. Like, not everybody got into the police force to be a Billy Badass and to bully people. Like, that's not why everybody got into it. Obviously, people got into it to do good things. Like, obviously, people do want justice for, like, the bad guys, and there are good cops out there. I fully 100% believe that. Some people really did just get to be a cop, like, went into being a cop just to be a bully, just to bully, like, black people. Like, that was purely their reason for being a cop, because they knew that they could get away with it. But it sucks that, like, there are good cops out there, but we don't see a ton of them. I feel like we're seeing a lot more of them now, because, like, everything is being recorded, everything's being shown on social media and all that kind of stuff. But the good cops aren't really speaking up. Like, they're not standing up for what they actually believe in. For example, I'm sure a lot of black cops out there are really struggling with this kind of stuff, because they kind of have to choose, oh, am I going to be a black person and stand with my family, stand with my culture, stand with my people, or am I going to be a cop and keep my job, be able to feed my wife and my kids, be able to feed my family, pay for a home? Like, they have to choose, because the system is so corrupt, and that really sucks. And I'm sorry for all those black cops out there that have to deal with that. All cops are bastards. It doesn't matter whether they're good or bad, because they are contributing to a corrupt system that has been placed upon black people since the freaking beginning of time. Cops were made to, like, fight against black people. We didn't have police before all the slaves were freed, because the government thought that slaves were going to be dangerous, and they thought that people needed correction and all that kind of stuff. Now that slaves were free, because they thought that all the slaves were going to be getting into trouble and stuff. And the word cop actually comes from coppers, which means to capture. So that is literally their pure intention, is to, like, capture. That's why they were made. That's why they are called cops. So just a little history there for you if you didn't know about that. That kind of leads me into the whole talk about, like, injustice, police brutality, like, systemic racism, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you've seen police brutality, and I don't think that police brutality is necessarily just against black people. It's against all people of color, and shoot, sometimes even white people, very rarely against white people, but it's because police feel like that they are above people, and they know that they're above people. They know that they are above the system and can do things to bully people just because they are police and we are not. But again, it is a lot more towards people of color. It is a lot more towards black people than it is white people. I don't want to hear anything about the statistics. Like, y'all know that there is way more white people in the world than there are black people. So obviously there are going to be more white people in jail than there are black people. Like, a little thing about systemic racism, it has been, like, made, and it was stemmed from, again, the beginning of time to specifically go against black people. And I want to bring attention to the fact that it not only shows up in the police force, it not only shows up, like, in that scenario, but it shows up in all government, like, all government run facilities. For example, it shows up in political systems and law systems. It shows up in the school system. It shows up in the medical system. It shows up in all of that kind of stuff. Injustice is literally shown all the time in these scenarios. For example, I rarely ever see a black teacher or a black principal. I rarely ever see that. Like, you a lot of the time will see black bus drivers, black lunch ladies, black custodians, all that kind of stuff within the school system. And that's because of systemic racism, because the system has been built against black people, so they have to get lower jobs than, like, the white people would, because there are plenty of white teachers, there are plenty of white principals and white secretaries and all that kind of stuff. But you rarely ever see black people of higher power within systems. Same thing with in the medical system. I rarely ever see black actual doctors. Like, I see black nurses, I see black, like, front office ladies, I see the check-in ladies, like, all that kind of stuff. Those people I've seen black people for, but I rarely ever see a black doctor. And I'm not saying that it can't happen, because you can make it happen, but I rarely ever see it. Same thing with, like, in banks. That's why black people a lot of time can't get loans. That's why they don't have as good living situations, because they're going to pick a white person over a black person to get a loan for a house or a loan for a car. That's, like, they've literally done studies where they'll put all of the same, like, application stuff on an application, like, all the same education, all of the same, like, history and everything like that, but they'll put a black stereotypical name, and then they'll put a white stereotypical name, and the white person always gets chosen before the black person does. And that's, again, why police are, like, all cops are considered bastards, because, again, bastardizing is to be corrupt. The system is corrupt. That's why we need to get it from the roots. That's why we need to educate. That's why, like, that's the only thing that we're going to solve. That's the only way that we're going to solve these issues, is if we educate, and if we get into the roots and get into the base of this problem. And then this is a lot more about my opinion, because I did say that I got told to like go to another country and stuff like that for my beliefs on this. But I just want to talk about like the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance and why I personally don't stand for it, why I don't agree with it, why that's just not me. I have always stood for the flag just because I didn't completely realize what it meant and that I was able to not stand for the flag until, of course, Colin Kaepernick. But I personally do not stand for the flag. And here's why. I just want to point out the fact that it in fact is not disrespectful. And people always tend to think like, oh, like you don't stand for the flag, so you don't care for the army, and people are out there fighting for your life and blah, 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 blah. But the flag does not stand for the military. The flag does not stand for the army. Of course, I appreciate all those people who are out there fighting for us, but the flag doesn't represent the army. It doesn't represent the military. It represents freedom and independence within the country. And I do recognize that the US has more like freedom than other countries do, because they're like the third world countries who don't have as much freedom as we do, and they have to worry about like a bunch of terrorists and all that kind of stuff, which is things that we don't have to worry about as much. But again, the flag does not stand for the military, it stands for freedom. But people need to recognize that us as Black people don't have the same freedoms that you guys as white people have. For example, white people can go around and walk in the dark with their hoods on. Black people can't do that. We don't have the same freedom to do that because we would be put in danger. We're worried about being killed just for having our hood on in like the wrong place and the wrong time. We can't play with toy guns. We can't play with squirt guns because that's considered a weapon, and people are going to be afraid that we're actually shooting people and that it's actually a dangerous thing. So if I don't have the freedom that everybody else does have in this country, if my family doesn't have that same freedom, why should I stand for the flag, which is supposed to represent freedom and independence? Because I don't have that same freedom. I don't have that same independence as everybody else does. So that's pretty much why I don't stand for the flag. You can think whatever you want. You can think I'm being disrespectful and dumb or whatever you want to think. But that's personally why I don't stand for it, because until I have that same freedom, until I can feel safe walking around in the streets by myself with my hood on, or I can feel safe walking to the corner store to go get some ice cream or some Skittles or whatever I want to get, until I feel safe doing that, until I know that my family is safe doing that, I'm not going to stand for the flag because I don't have that same freedom that everybody else does. So the very last section that I like want to talk about is the difference between like racism, prejudice, and microaggressions, because a lot of people don't realize that like there's like a difference, you know? So there obviously is a difference between racism, prejudice, and microaggressions. Racism is essentially showing like an unbalanced amount of power between races. So example, white people oppressing minority. You cannot be racist to a white person. You can be prejudiced to a white person, and we'll get into prejudice in a minute, but you cannot be racist to a white person, because to be racist to a white person, you'd have to oppress them using your power. A white person can call the cops on me for walking around in the park, and I could be doing nothing wrong. I could be not being dangerous, nothing. I could just be walking around, and then the cops would come up and they would show up and they would arrest me for literally doing nothing. But so because that is them using their power as an oppressor, their power as a majority against me as a minority with less power than they have. But me as a Black person, I can't call the cops and accuse a white person of doing this, because since the people are white, they will come in, the cops will come in and they'll be like, oh, well, someone just complained about you like walking around in the dark, so if you could please go home, like that would be great. That is basically like what like racism is, using your power against minorities and the oppression and all that kind of stuff. But you can be prejudiced towards white people. You can be prejudiced all you want, but you cannot be racist to a white person, because currently white people are in the position of power. White people are the majority. They got the privilege, they got the power, which Black people don't have. But now that leads me into prejudice. And prejudice is essentially like a pre-made judgment on someone that is normally like stereotypical. And a lot of the time it's not based on your own experience, but I believe that it kind of can be based off your own experience as well. It's just like you're kind of generalizing a whole group of people based off of either your experience or not your experience. It can be based off race. It can also not be based on race. It could be like based off something else. For example, like the dumb blonde stereotype. That's considered prejudice. And also some prejudice can actually be positive, because if you're putting like a positive judgment based off someone, then like again, that's going to be positive. But some prejudice again is also bad, and it leads to racist outcomes. For example, like the whole dumb blonde thing, that is like a pre-assumed idea in your head that can lead to like a bunch of jokes and like a bunch of mean things happening. But you have to step back and think like, okay, Lil Johnny might be blonde and have German descent, so then he grows up and people are making fun of him for that and people are bullying him for that and all that kind of stuff. But you need to recognize that that may be bad, but that's not racist, because it's not the same thing as somebody calling the black person the N-word or all of the oppression that black people have faced over the years. So, for example, again, I can be prejudiced to a white person all I want. I could say that white people can't handle spicy things and white people are this and white people are that. But that may lead to jokes, but that doesn't match up nearly as much to the oppression that black people have faced, to calling a black person the N-word and stereotyping them. And not like, just because you're white and have blonde hair doesn't mean that you're going to get any less of a job, because color of your hair doesn't determine your job. That's why, like, it's, some can be racist and some cannot be. And then there's microaggressions, which not a lot of people even recognize that they're even a thing. They don't even know about them. But microaggression is when you essentially stigmatize people, and it's very, like, normally it's a lot of time very subtle, and it's also stunning, and it can be verbal, it can be nonverbal. Often it's like an automatic like put down, and like it's just kind of like something that like pops into your head and you don't even know it. For example, when people say, oh, I'm not racist because I have black friends, that's essentially stigmatizing and saying that you're immune to racism because you have black people that are around you. You could still be racist just because you have black friends. It doesn't mean anything. Or an example of a non-verbal microaggression is like when people clutch their purse, or when store workers follow black people or Hispanic people around a store. That's essentially you telling a black person, you're a thief, you're gonna steal, you're a dangerous person. So those are just some like examples of microaggressions. You don't even mean to be like rude about, like if you ask an Asian person or anybody of Asian descent to ask to help you answer a math or a science problem, that's you essentially putting them above other races because they're considered like the smart race, you know? So that's also another example of a microaggression that you may not even know that's even like considered a bad microaggression, because you may not be putting down the Asian people, but you are putting down other races. That is actually all I have for this video. I might have missed a couple of things. I might even have more to talk about, but that was basically all that I had to say. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys go check out all of my other Black Lives Matter videos, which will be in cards as you go along throughout this video. Yeah, I hope this helped you guys. I hope this helped you guys with ideas and helped educate everybody. And yeah, I hope that this benefited you guys in some way. But yeah, I love you guys so much, and thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out all my other videos. Comment down below what else you guys would like to see from me in the future, because after these last two videos of this Black Lives Matter series, all programming is going back to normal schedule. I will always have the links for the Black Lives Matter resources down below, so make sure you guys go check those out. But yeah, so I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.